And I wanted to give a thank you to all that were involved in planning and supporting the expo this year. That would be our workshop hosts, volunteers especially, those who handed out flyers and promoted the event online, hike leaders, executive committee representatives who were at our booth, the setup crew, which works like a well-oiled machine, and the committee members especially, who gave their time and talents over the last probably 6+ months to get that thing up and running. So again, we just had a successful event on Saturday, and if you have any comments or questions or suggestions for next year, please reach out to me or someone that was on the committee, and we will take them into consideration. Thank you.
Sarah, I have a comment about Expo. It was really great. I am so proud of this chapter because this chapter puts together Expo, which really brings all these like-minded organizations into one spot and really promotes responsible outdoor recreation as a huge group. And it brings so many people into that fold. So thank you very much. One other thing, how many people here, raise your hand or even better stand up, who volunteered at Expo this time? Look at that. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh, and next year, June 8th.
June 8th. Sign up now to be a volunteer. It is the 25th Expo on June 8th. Mark your calendars. You can get your phone out to do that right now. Just keep it quiet. Okay. So our first speaker for oh golly, I'm getting big trouble. I mean, big trouble. I'm in even bigger trouble. Annie, hi, you have something for us?
Yeah, I just want to put out there that we posted, the young members posted the Johnsbrook Jamboree, the Johnsbrook Large trip that we run. It's the first weekend in August. You don't have to be young, obviously I'm not that young, but you don't have to be young necessarily to join us. There's a link on the website for the ADK GVC group, and then if you're a Facebook person, there's also, if you're on the Young Members ADK website for Facebook, it's there too. We're having a little glitch with the payment, so if you sign up and it gives you a weird message with the payment, we're working on it. Hopefully it'll be there soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Annie. Jackson.
Got it. Hi, everybody. He always wants to offer that microphone to my big mouth, and you know I don't need it. Well, thank heavens for a last-moment delivery. Our faithful volunteer at Montezuma just brought me 8 more of these maps. And for the princely sum of $1 each, you may not only take home this guide map, but you can also support a wonderful cause at the Montezuma Sanctuary, Wetlands Complex. So see me at the end of the program over at the bookstore table. I'll be right back. Don't go away. Now, if you want a little sample of what insanity can become when you get to be my stage in life, you have to think about the fact that here I am 10 times a year for over 30 years, dragging bookstore merchandise back and forth, back and forth. And for a good number of those years, some of that merchandise has been ADK shirts, whether it's the High Peaks checklist, like this, okay, or the shirt that we used to use many years ago for our chapter, This one right here. Less than 15 minutes ago, I had 6 of these little beauties still going back and forth. But thanks to a couple of wonderful members, I now have only 2 left. And I'm offering these shirts for $10. The original prices are somewhere between $20 and $35. So if you happen to want a medium in this style, or you happen to take a small in this style, please see me after the program, and I'd be glad to send those home with you, knowing that you'll give them a very, very good home. One final thing, Dave. Here it is. Don't do that. For those of you who have been faithfully attending our programs for the last 9 months,
we have a winner!
I have been trying to find you every month since last June. Well, I want you to know I have given that whatever it's called. No. I've given it a very good safe home since 1 year ago, almost to the very day. So thank you for being here and for rescuing your long-lost friend. Thanks, everybody.
So you guys have seen me up here. There's no reason to bring someone up to introduce me and then for me to come back. I've got the microphone in my hand. I'm Dave Nichols, I'm the chair, and my wife and I volunteered to give half of the program tonight as members night on our trip to the Canadian National Rockies. As it turned out, you can tell that the better half of our partnership isn't here. Jill's actually up in the Adirondacks as a campground volunteer, so she isn't able to make it tonight. So it's just me. Sorry about that. So we took this wonderful trip to Banff, Yoho, and Jasper National Parks last August. It was actually something we had planned 2 years ago, but with COVID and the cancellation of border crossings, we had to put that off. So this is displaying, right? Okay. So I'm going to talk about Jasper, Banff, and Yoho National Parks. If you include Kootenai National Park, it forms a continuous system of parks that covers 8,000 square miles. It is right along the Continental Divide, so it's an extension of the Rocky Mountains, but the parks cover the Continental Divide. It is a UNESCO National Heritage Site. We actually flew into Calgary and then drove to different places, and then along the way we would take hikes and just really explore the area. So this presentation essentially follows our trip chronologically. We started in Banff. Banff is just a gorgeous, cute little town along the Bow River Valley. It's close to the western edge of Alberta. And the big mountain that you see to the north is Cascade Mountain. I know there's a lot of Cascade Mountains around. This is the one in the Canadian Rockies. It's at about 9,800 feet above sea level. The photo to To the lower right was a deer that was just wandering just off Main Street while we were there. Our first foray was along the Bow River Parkway. The Bow River is a river that, let's see if I can find my pointer. So the Bow River runs right through this area. I'll show another picture of it in a minute. It comes from the Bow Lake, which comes from Bow Glacier and Bow Glacier Falls. And this river runs from the Rockies through Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, into the north, into the Hudson Bay, and then eventually into the Atlantic Ocean. So on its way, it goes through various lakes and rivers. We actually took a bike ride along the Bow River Parkway and biked to Johnston Canyon. This is a fairly deep gorge that's caused by erosion from the Johnston Creek. There are several absolutely gorgeous waterfalls along the way. I grabbed a couple pictures for you to see in that region. It's only a 1.5 mile hike. It is very popular because it's very short, but it's also very scenic. Also along the Bow Valley Parkway, there were animals wandering around as if they owned the place and the tourists were just visitors. Seemed to make sense to me. These are a few bighorn sheep along the road. There were areas where there had been an observed burn. Normally, this region would, in many, many past years, would have gone through natural burning from thunderstorms about every 20 to 50 years, and that's necessary for the renewal of the lodgepole pines and the aspens in the region. Now, observed burns are done just to keep the tinder down and to allow those trees to continue to reproduce and forest the area. But it's very hard to find the right time to do an observed burn, because if you do it at the wrong time, it can be calamitous and extend to a much larger area. We took a hike in Sunshine Meadows. Sunshine Meadows is a fairly large park back in Banff National Park that's beyond what's called Sunshine Village Ski Resort. This is just an example of one of the scenes while taking a hike in Sunshine Meadows. Here's another view of Sunshine Meadows, Rock Island Lake and Lyrics Lake. So, I've got a half hour to talk, so I'm going to move pretty quickly, and I'm going to leave an awful lot of stuff out, but that's the way it is. With a name like Sunshine Meadows, you'd expect to find wildflowers, and we certainly did. To get to Sunshine Meadows, one can park down in the ski parking lot and then hike up this 3-mile dusty dry road to get up to Sunshine Meadows. At least the guidebook told us that's what we should do. And it was one of the worst 3-mile hikes I've ever had, to be honest. It was dry, it was dusty, it was windy. So we got back to Banff after seeing this beautiful Sunshine Meadows, and I walked into a bookstore, and I came across this book, and I've got to get the title right. It's entitled, "Don't Waste Your Time in the Canadian Rockies." An opinionated hiking guide to help you get the most from this magnificent wilderness. Guess what? That dry, dusty 3-mile road made their top 25 list of things not to do. So, pay attention to more than one guidebook if you go and follow what we did. Oh, and it was so beautiful. We spent all day hiking Sunshine Meadows. It turned out that the last lift back down and avoiding that dusty road left at 5 o'clock. So we just kept seeing more and more great scenery. And I said, I think we got to start moving. Well, we got to the lift at 4:58. We've got to turn this thing on. Just in time to be able to get that last lift down and not to have to travel that dusty road back down. Well, that's interesting. Hold on a second.
Yeah, I didn't go to this
Another great hike is up to Sulphur Mountain. Sulphur Mountain is to the south of Banff town. It's about 3.5 miles up, and it's about a 2,500 vertical hike. This is just one view along the way. From near the peak, you can see really for miles. Down below is the town of Banff. Cascade Mountain that I talked about earlier is this mountain, and you can see the Bow River. You'll notice that all the rivers and lakes in this area have this beautiful cerulean blue color, and that's because all of them are fed from runoff from glaciers. The glaciers scour the land and create a very fine dust that's picked up by the water and is in all the waters in this region. That dust that's in the water reflects mostly blue and green light, so it gives a blue-greenish tinge to the lakes and rivers in the area. Also of interest is this little peak here. That little peak is called Tunnel Mountain. When the Canadian Pacific Railway was planning a route through the Bow Valley for their railroad, they originally planned to blast a tunnel through that small peak. Well, they never did. So there's no tunnel through it. And it's really not a mountain. It's really not that high. But it's still called Tunnel Mountain in spite of that. So if you hike up to Sulphur Mountain to the top, there's a tram up there that can take you down. And then once you've come back down, you can sit and soak in the hot springs from which it gets its name. Sulphur Mountain gets its name from the sulfur smell of the hot springs at the base of the mountain. And you just get absolutely gorgeous views while you're just soaking in the hot springs. And yes, I did that. And it was wonderful. Those hot springs have been operating since 1886. So let's move just a little bit northwest to the Lake Louise area. This is about 36 miles northeast of Banff, only 7 miles from British Columbia. There's a hamlet and a lake, both named Lake Louise. It's one of the major attractions in the area, and for a good reason. Oh, by the way, I'm not a great photographer. It's just the scenery is so gorgeous. All the pictures on here, with the exception of 2 or 3, were taken with this. So these are real images. I didn't doctor these at all. It was just jaw-droppingly gorgeous. Here's another of my photos from Lake Louise, and I have no words to describe the beauty of that place. There are several great trails that emanate from Lake Louise. We took one to Mirror Lake, Lake Agnes, and its tea house, and also a knoll called Little Beehive. My wife is setting the pace along one of the trails, and that's really typical of what the trails look like. And one of the views is of Lake Louise and Mirror Lake that you can see from the right. Not a bad place to take a rest and take in the views. That's me. You can probably tell from the back now. Bad joke, bad joke. Across the way is Fairview Mountain. That's about 9,000 feet above sea level. And the lake is Lake Louise down below. So here's the tea house and Lake Agnes. I was sitting right on the patio when I took the picture on the right. I was sitting right about there. It's just a great place to get a refreshing little snack and just enjoy the views. You only can get there by foot. All the food and everything comes up by foot. Another lake in the area is Moraine Lake. It's surrounded on all three sides by several peaks, and the area is called Valley of the 10 Peaks. The views of Moraine Lake are sometimes referred to as a $20 view because the views, that picture has been on 2 different $20 bills that were printed in Canada. But it's just absolutely gorgeous. I keep using that word. I gotta think of another word other than gorgeous. Oops. Here's another view. You can see more of the peaks that surround Moraine Lake. And one more view. There are a few hiking trails from the north end of Moraine Lake. We followed one to Constellation Lakes. Along the way we saw a hoary marmot and also saw a spruce grouse with 6 nearly grown chicks. The chicks were running all over the place. I couldn't get a picture of them, but I did get a picture of the hen. So let's now move over to Yoho National Park. One of the great scenes is the Takaka Falls. In Cree it means it is magnificent. It's only a little over a mile round trip to see the falls. Really worthwhile. This water flows from the Daly Glacier. That was the wrong button to push. Good thing they're not paying me for this thing. Oh, come on. You really can go backwards. So this waterfall is 830 feet high. Niagara Falls is about 180. I had to look that up. You know, I just don't live that far from it, but how many people know how high Niagara Falls is? This is really high. And another lake in Yoho National Park is Emerald Lake. This is just inside the British Columbia, of the province of British Columbia. It supposedly looks more green because of the particular glacial sediment that's in the water. but this picture doesn't show it to be emerald green. So it really also depends, the color depends a lot on where you are looking at it from, because if you're up high and you're looking down, it looks more greenish because of the way this light scatters versus when you're at lake level. The next thing we're going to talk about is the Icefields Parkway. There are a huge number of stops along the parkway that connects Banff and Jasper. Just way too many things to talk about, so I'll just mention a few. The wildlife is pretty present. Elk, mountain goats, black bear. There are interesting animal bridges. There are 6 of these along the Icefields Parkway that allow the animals to cross from west to east or east to west. These are covered by trees and mosses and grasses and bushes. There are also 38 tunnels and culverts that go underneath the parkway for animals to move across. And then there are high fences along the parkway. You can just barely see one of the fences off to the edge there. Bow Lake is along the Icefields Parkway, and it's the source of the Bow River. Again, you can see that gorgeous color that all the lakes have up there. In the background, you can see Bow Glacier. We took a hike all the way up to the waterfall that comes off from Bow Glacier. This is a picture along that hike, and you can see my wife Jill and myself just enjoying a nice lunch during our hike next to Bow Lake. And if you hike all the way in, it's about 3 miles. You can take in the views of Bow Glacier Falls that leads from Bow Glacier and down into the lake. At this point, we're about 7,000 feet above sea level. Another beautiful lake along the way is Pado Lake. It is fed by Pado Glacier, and it is fed from the Wapta ice fields, which is along the Continental Divide. There are a huge number of glaciers in this area. It's hard to imagine the number. This is Bridal Veil Falls, also along the parkway. It's supposedly 1,200 feet vertical. We saw about 280 feet of it. And it's really easily missed. There's very few markers or signs about it, but it was really pretty. Another hike for us from the parkway was the Parker Ridge Trail, a 4-mile round trip with some beautiful views of wildflowers in the region at lower levels and the Saskatchewan Glacier and surrounding mountains when you look up. Here's the Saskatchewan Glacier. This feeds the Saskatchewan River, which flows all the way into the Hudson Bay, the Atlantic. And you can catch, oh, I did that again. Never mind. So, get this right. So this is the glacier that feeds the North Saskatchewan River. And then way back up here is the Columbia ice fields. So now I'm going to move on into Jasper National Park after driving up the Icefields Parkway. The Athabasca Falls and Gorge are worth a stop. It's not a huge falls, but it's really energetic, vibrant, about an 80-foot drop, and the amount of water through that falls is really impressive, through both the falls and the gorge. This water leaves the glacier, Athabasca Glacier, flows through the Athabasca River, and then flows north into the Arctic Ocean. Another hike is the Mount Edith Cavell trails. They lead to absolutely beautiful alpine mountain scenery, occasional animal sightings like the little pika, the smallest member of the rabbit family. There's Angel Glacier, which I'll show in a minute, is also visible. Here's another picture of Angel Glacier, which is the one that looks like the wings in the centerpiece coming down. Do I risk using the pointer again? I will do it. So this is Angel Glacier, this is Cavell Pond, and this is another glacier, Cavell Glacier. And Moline Lake, it's said to be one of the largest natural lakes in the Canadian Rockies. It's fed by the Moline River, and the name comes from a French Jesuit explorer who was trying to cross the Moline River. And in doing so, he said it was just wicked, and in French. And so that name stuck. It is a wicked view. On Moline Lake is Spirit Island. This is a very common photograph that you'll see in many places from this area. This island is a spiritual place for the Stoney Nakoda First Nations people. There are no trails to this point. You can only get out here by a tourist boat. And then once you're there, you're not allowed to go out onto the island because it is sacred to the Stoney Nakoda people. I'm going to spend just a little bit of time talking about the Columbia Icefield. It's a source of 6 major glaciers that provide water that flows into 3 different oceans: the Pacific Ocean through the Columbia River and the Columbia Glacier, as well as I've talked about the northern Saskatchewan River and the Athabasca already. This is the Athabasca Glacier. To give you a sense of the size of this glacier, I've got a little arrow pointing to some buses that take tourists out onto the glacier. The wheels on that bus are about this high, this long. So you get an idea that those buses are huge, and that glacier is very large. There's about 20 feet of snow each year that falls on the Columbia Icefield. It gets compacted to about a foot of ice. Unfortunately, about 16 feet of ice melts off this glacier every year, and it's receded about a mile in the last 125 years. Now, my wife, Jill, gave me an absolutely wonderful birthday present, and that was to take a hike onto the glacier. We didn't do the buses, we just hiked past them. So there's Jill, and we joined this tour. It's a guided tour, and hiked about 3/4 of a mile out onto the glacier. You have to go with a guide because there are many fissures and holes and streams inside the glacier. And once you enter the glacier, kind of game over. Because you're probably not, if you're coming out, you're probably not. Although one person has fallen into the glacier and come out alive. I did not want to try that experiment. It did look like fun. In the last 3 months, we were there in August, the glacier has already lost 3 feet in thickness. And you can see some of the fissures and stuff there. So this was a huge thrill to me, and I'm using this as essentially my last slide because it was such a thrill to be walking out on ice from snow that had fallen, you know, hundreds or thousands of years ago and made its way from the Columbia Icefield all the way down. So that's Joe and my quick tour of the parks in the Canadian Rockies. Probably have time, very short time for questions, and maybe Jerry, if you could turn on the lights, and I can answer the questions while Luke and Jim set up for their talk. Thank you. Questions? Yes, Barb?
Hey, what's on your feet in that picture when you're on the glacier?
Microspikes.
That looks like a different
No, they were just microspikes over my hiking boots. You wouldn't go out onto the glacier without microspikes. It's slick. It's really interesting. As you approach the glacier, there are some fairly large rocks, and they all have these big scratches across them from when the glacial ice was forced down. The ice starts up at the ice fields and then just flows down all the way down there, causing all sorts of damage along the road. Other questions? Yes? We were there for a couple of weeks. Yeah, I left out tons of slides. So that's the way it goes. Other questions? Yes? On the glacier, it was cold. You can see how we were bundled up, Lois. But it was in the 60s and 70s during the day, so it was pretty pleasant to hike in. Yes?
How did you arrive at your starting point?
So we drove to, so the question was how we arose, how we got to our starting point. So we drove to Toronto and took WestJet to Calgary. And from there, rented a car to go up through there. It turned out WestJet, when we made the original connections in 2020, and they gave us exactly 2 years to use those tickets when we weren't allowed to come in. So that's why we were just right on the edge of using those tickets.
Did you go through an organization
Excuse me?
Did you go through some organization to schedule the trip?
No, we just did it on our own, yeah. It was pretty easy to do. There's lots of literature and stuff online, and it's really very pleasant, easy. Yes? No, there were no special permits. In order to go to, we didn't go to one lake because you did need to sign up, and we tried multiple times to sign up. I can't think of the lake off the top of my head. I'm sure somebody here knows it. And we never got there because it's limited in how many people are able to go. You did have to pay a good price to walk out onto the glacier, but that was easy to schedule. Other questions? Okay, thank you very much. So just bear with us for a couple